Hi, guys. Welcome to Real Food Recovery. We have an exciting topic today. We are going to be diving deep into something that many of us struggle with, but seldom talk about, and that is shame. We often hear about the physical and emotional challenges of overcoming processed food addiction, obsession, and compulsion, but the role of shame in this journey is profound and often overlooked. So, in this episode, we'll explore how shame affects our recovery and, more importantly, how we can move past it to find freedom and healing. But first of all, I must say hello to my partner in crime, Jamie. How's it going?
Hey there. Good, good. This is an interesting topic, and I know before we recorded today, I was asking you sort of what was your goal with this episode, because my thought whenever I hear any talks about any themes or podcasts or anyone doing an interviews on shame, I just want to know, is the goal to sort of remove the stigma around it or to talk about how to deal with it? So it sounds like we're our goal today is going to be both, which is a
Yeah.
good thing. Uh,
Mhm.
very excited to talk about this topic. And the overarching theme, right, is to really have a toolkit to work from and to work with when we're feeling shame.
Yeah.
When I think about shame, there's certainly lots of areas in my own life that I'm dealing with that and have dealt with it. But it's really all about understanding where it's coming from, and that's, for me in my spiritual journey, it's not coming from a place of um, my belief system. It's
Right.
not coming from a place of my spiritual practice, meaning, an easier way to say this is, it's shame is not something that God gives me. Shame is something that comes from the other side of the spectrum, and it's not something that my spiritual belief system would want me to carry around.
I, I agree. I agree with you so much. And, we need to make some clarifications on what we mean by shame. Shame is often confused with guilt, but
Mhm.
they are fundamentally different emotions. Guilt is feeling bad about something you did. It's linked to a specific action and can be a motivator for change. So I don't really mind guilt. I think a little bit of guilt is okay. But shame, on the other hand, is feeling bad about who you are.
Yeah,
It's a deep-seated belief that you are inherently flawed and unworthy, which all that can get into dangerous territory.
very true. Very, very true. So this is a huge topic to differentiate, right? So the whole idea of differentiating shame from guilt is very important. So we are big fans of Brené Brown and the work that she does around shame. She's a shame researcher,
Hmm.
um, and she does a great job of distinguishing one from the other. She says that based on her research around shame, there's a profound difference between the two, right? Between shame and guilt. She believes that guilt is adaptive and helpful. It's sort of holding up something we've done to allow us to scrutinize it, think about how we could have done it differently, maybe do something different because of it, and allows us to really make a change based on how we felt from when we did that action or took that action or took that made that decision around something. Guilt can be a conviction point to do something different.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. And in fact, I want to stop here a minute and just talk about a workshop that Jamie did for RFR on personal values. She said something that indicates that when we're making choices that don't align with our personal values, then we are not living in harmony within ourselves. And then that invites suffering. And we all want to avoid suffering, right? It
Mhm.
is the perfect storm for feeling guilt. For me, I know that every sugar binge I had held a myriad of emotions for me. And one of them actually was guilt. I could not wrap my head around why I was this girl in super control of every area of my life. But a few times a month, I could no longer white knuckle myself through the day. And honestly, that's before recovery. That's all I was doing is white knuckling through the day. So that's why it only lasted so long before a binge came on. I lived in a constant state of being tormented by trying to power through a day without either thinking about binging, or recovering from a binge and then recommitting to not ever doing that again because I was always so sick and depressed and panicked about what all these extreme measures I was going to have to do to undo all that I had just done. So I would go straight into that diet mentality of super restricting my food the next day, over exercising the next day. It was pure insanity. This is in all caps. I'm speaking in all caps. There were no normal days. I didn't know what
Mhm.
a normal day was like because
Yeah.
peace was nowhere to be found. And like I've said before, peace and calm in my brain is the ultimate goal. There was nothing quiet about what I was living through. It was hell every single day. I was in severe pain and I had no one to talk to about this because who would understand what I was feeling? That was my perception anyway, because I didn't see anyone around me worrying constantly like I was. I never had a girlfriend to talk to about it, and I didn't know that it was something that even could be solved. I just thought this is the way my life was, and I would live the rest of my life. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't have the vocabulary to even talk about it. So even if I wanted to talk about it, I didn't know what was happening. How would I explain it? How would I even look it up or share my concerns? I didn't have words for what was happening. I just knew every couple times a month something would come over me where I would lose absolute all control, like I was floating around above my body watching me doing this hand to mouth thing, and I
Mhm.
literally couldn't stop even though internally I wanted to. There was a major disconnect. Like I said, it felt like an aura that came over me, and I didn't know how long it would stay or when it would go. So honestly, I mostly just thought I was weak, and that was a sickening feeling. And that's where I think the guilt and shame both came
Yeah.
in for me.
Yeah. So when Brene gives further details about shame, to reiterate, she says that shame is the intensely painful feeling or experience, right? So it could be both, of believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. Something we've experienced, done, or failed to do makes us unworthy of connection. She doesn't believe shame is helpful or productive, and we agree with that. In fact, she says shame is much more likely to be the source of destructive, hurtful behavior than the solution or cure. She
Hmm.
thinks the fear of disconnection can make us dangerous. Yeah,
It's
I don't know how that phrase lands for me, but I I can see the what she's getting at, right, with the whole idea of
desperate.
dangerous, right? Yeah, that desperation or coming from a place of scarcity. And I don't know, again, dangerous feels like a strong word there, but um, it can, we will act from a place of scarcity, we'll act from a place of desperation. And that can just cause lots more harm than good.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but I've been desperate for, we've talked in here about bad boyfriends before, but
Mhm.
the panic of losing that connection to a bad boyfriend or anybody that I feel like you do things that you would not normally do under controlled circumstances. I'm
Good point.
wondering if that's what she means by that, but
Yes,
I know
I'm
I don't know about you, but I have felt that desperation about losing a connection to someone that, oh my gosh, I'll die if
mhm,
I don't have that.
yeah.
So, where does shame even come from? You might wonder. Shame can stem from various sources. It might begin in childhood with critical remarks about your eating habits or body image. But as you grow older, societal pressures and media portrayal of this ideal body can amplify these feelings. When you struggle with processed food, each perceived failure, like a binge or a relapse, can intensify this shame, creating this vicious cycle which does not help people that are seeking a calm brain trying to get off these ultra processed foods and just create so much stress in their life.
Yeah. One of the most damaging effects of shame is that it drives secrecy. You might hide your eating habits from others, lie about your consumption, or avoid social situations where your addiction might be exposed. This secrecy not only isolates you, but also prevents you from seeking the help and support you need. Um, for sure, that's always been my experience around shame. And certainly when I was, a kid, I would never talk about how I was eating, what I was eating, if I, other than the food that I was eating in front of others. So there would be food that I would eat as a kid, especially in my home after others went to bed,
Mm.
or I would, sneak it up to my room or whatever it was. Have you had experiences with this page?
Unfortunately, I have. And what comes to mind was this girls' trip that I took to Europe several years ago. I mean, just this beautiful opportunity to have this wonderful experience in Europe. And one of the places we went was Belgium, specifically Bruges, Belgium. And that is just a charmed little city that was never ruined by war. And it's this quintessential little, it looks like a movie set. It just is absolutely a dream place to visit. And there was, they are known for their chocolates, obviously, in Belgium, and there was a homemade chocolatier on literally every corner. I'm not exaggerating about that. That they saw me coming a mile away. So I think I stopped at every single one because I didn't want anybody to feel left out. So no one seemed to be as affected by all these chocolatiers as I was. I noticed that I was the driver going, okay, let's go in this one. Okay, let's go in this one. Everyone I wanted to go in, and they are beautiful. So I did like the beauty aspect of it too, but everybody knows what I was really wanting. I wanted to get high. I wanted another fix, and I saw that no one else bought as much as me, and I literally could not stop eating these homemade Belgian chocolates. It actually caused me more pain to stop than to keep going because my brain, when I say my brain was begging me for more and to not stop, it was like a 2-year-old wanting a popsicle from you. It would not stop.
Mm.
And so when I say literally begging, I am not exaggerating on any level. I might even be so dramatic as to say I was panic eating them because I would have to leave. At some point I'd have to leave the country and then I'd be out, right, man? My stash would be gone. So my dilemma was that the others had started to notice this constant consumption. I mean, every time they turned around, I was just putting it in as fast as I can. Now I had a problem on my hands because I was aware there was a spotlight on my behavior. So how can I sneak and quietly keep this up without feeling embarrassed and
Mm.
feeling like they're going to be talking about me? Because then we're back to that disconnection, right? I would not
Right.
be the same person in the group. I would feel, and this is the stories in my head, I would feel like an outcast. I'm different than
Sure.
everybody else, which I was. So that's where the shame started creeping in for me. And when you have to live in these shadows of life to feel like you can fit in, it's a miserable feeling like you are living this lie, which only drives that need for more comfort and the need to self-soothe. Then we get into these unhealthy patterns for self-soothing versus healthy habits of self-care that we talk about so much in recovery. And I might add at this point that I know now for those on the addiction spectrum or
Mhm.
those that suffer effects of processed food, specifically sugar for me, it's not moderatable. I can't do it. For me, I have to abstain in order to avoid that binge cycle that I was describing earlier. Every
Mhm.
time I get back into it, there's no cutoff in my brain. There's not a shut off valve for that.
Sure.
There's only get more, get more, get more. But you know what? This is so much better on the other side. I can now be in a pastry shop or watch people eat dessert, even homemade chocolates, and be unaffected. And actually, I'm even grateful as I'm sitting there watching it. I'm so thankful that I'm not in that dark, tormented place of hell, that I can calmly watch other people do it. And just the gratitude I feel for being able to maintain my peace. I don't struggle with shame about it anymore either. I'm not living with secrets and I'm comfortable being myself with others. I like Jamie saying about the addiction takes you out of life and your world gets very small. So, Jamie, do you think that the place to start with all this, do you feel like recovery is the first step to focus on, or do you think addressing these feelings of shame is the first place to start?
Yeah.
Chicken and the egg.
Right. Yeah. We know that no one has ever hated themselves into recovery. So a little compassion is definitely a good place to start. The first big step is overcoming, and overcoming shame is simply just recognizing it, recognizing that you have it, that you're feeling it, paying attention to your inner dialogue. Are you telling yourself that you're weak or hopeless or a failure?
Mm.
Acknowledging these thoughts without judgment is the first step. Simply being aware of them, is a powerful place to start. And to further that, practicing self-compassion is also crucial. You slip up, if you slip up, especially treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer to a friend.
Mhm.
So, so many times we'll talk to ourselves in very harsh or cruel ways, but if somebody were to hear us or point that out, they would say, you never speak. If a friend of ours would hear us say that out loud to ourselves, they would say, you never talk to me like that. How can
Mm.
you do that to yourself? That doesn't even seem like like you're the same person.
Mhm.
Um, so again, treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding that you would offer that friend. And when you slip up, instead of berating yourself, acknowledge the slip and remind yourself that everyone makes mistakes, and recovery is not about being perfect, right? We were talking this morning about discipline as a practice, right? And recording one of our weekly wisdoms that Paige and Shay and I record, and we talked about this phrase that I heard growing up all the time: practice makes perfect, practice makes perfect, practice makes perfect. And it 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 drilled this idea that perfection was a thing and it was attainable, and that only perfection was acceptable. And I love the whole idea about practice makes progress.
Yeah.
Practice
Yeah.
makes permanence, as Shay says, which I also like. So yeah, some things to alleviate shame there too.
I don't suppose you remember that quote that you said that was so good this morning about practice. That, okay. It was really
Practice
good.
makes progress is the only one I remember.
Yeah. It, yeah, don't you feel like when we talk about practice, it makes progress that just feels more inviting? You don't have to be
For sure.
perfect at it.
For sure.
Just let's just try.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
we understand the opposite of shame is honor. So engaging in honorable actions has to make a difference.
Mhm.
Not only that, but moving from fear, blame, and disconnection and leaning into empathy, courage, and compassion and connection. We talk a lot in recovery about compassion and how that changes things in the brain. If you are able to have a conversation with yourself about your circumstance and see where compassion might fit into the equation, it might just begin to change that trajectory of healing. I know I'm leaning a lot into self-talk right now, and I can't believe how much it can move the needle from the negative to the positive, from
Mhm.
I can't do this to okay, everything's going to be okay. I've got an idea of how to handle what's coming up. So self-talk is huge.
Yeah, that's why it's one of our branches of recovery, right? It really
Hmm.
it really does make a big difference.
Hmm.
We know as humans we're wired to the negative. Now, I want to revise that a little bit. We're not wired to the negative. We're wired to self-protect.
Very,
And we're
very
wired
good.
to make sure that we preserve our lives, because we're wired, our brains are wired to preserve the species. So we are wired to protect ourselves and protect the ones that we love. But that in doing so, we can have a inclination to always assess our environment around us for its protective abilities or the abilities to harm us.
Mhm.
And many of us will have a thought process that will think, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Because that's sort of their learned attempt at self protection. Um, but that can really work against us over time, especially if you couple that with childhood trauma or modeling during childhood of negative self-talk, negative patterns of behavior among family members, or abuse, emotional, physical, verbal abuse on top of that. Then this can really add to sort of these cycles of stories in our heads that are negative, or that it can create something called hypervigilance, which is
Mhm.
all about how to look constantly, scanning your environment or relationships for danger. That is not a healthy place to live. That is not a healthy place for anyone to try to exist. It certainly does not promote healthy relationships or um, a healthy life in general. So we want to be mindful if we're noticing that we're in those places, to really be aware of that hypervigilance and those choices that you're making, to look at things maybe glass half full, and have the power to reframe those thoughts in a way that tells the full story. And of course, being able to scrutinize if what we're telling ourselves is true or not, because the truth is kinder than we give ourselves credit for. And that's something, I just learned today, right, in the last 24 hours, talking to Paige about something that was bothering me, that I was taking on as something that I was doing or not doing. And, Paige was very quick to point out, hey, you're being too hard on yourself here. It's really not the way you're seeing it. And that was a very helpful way to sort of reframe things.
Thank you. I know. And isn't it interesting that going back to humans being wired to the negative, you explained it much better, but that's when we take on that blame at such large volume, I think that's part of being wired into us too, where we have to just stop and say, okay, let's dial it back and take a deeper look and put it in proper perspective. But I feel like we're all guilty of that. Well, we are our own harshest critics, right?
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
So yeah, I love this conversation. Great stuff. I have to say that when I first started recovery, I learned that my brain was actually responding to these processed foods in a way they were designed to make me behave. That one thought changed everything for me.
Mhm.
I'd never thought about it in that way because I went from I'm just a weak-willed person to, oh, this is about physiology. It ain't about my character. So that was extremely helpful. I was trying to fight science every
Mhm.
day because my idea was, how can I moderate these immoderatable foods like I'm Houdini? And guess what? It never worked. I never could pull the rabbit out of the basket or the hat. And I always thought I had a willpower problem, but I didn't. I had a processed food addiction problem that could only ever be solved through abstinence. I don't think that can be said enough for people to hear that
Mhm.
enough, that you just simply cannot moderate these processed foods. It's not possible to eat just one. Even the marketers agree with their own slogan, and they are laughing all the way to the bank on our dime. So after that realization, guess what? The shame started falling off me. I had become addicted to these foods without my knowledge and without my permission. No one ever told me that these sugar-laden foods would uh, that were fed to me from my earliest memory would invite the most pain I have ever felt in my life and would be my constant companion for the first 57 years of my life. And this is where things started turning around for me. I was able to move from that negative to that empathy, courage, and compassion and connection. Then my whole world started to change and get bigger. Brene Brown has this famous statement that I love. Empathy creates a hostile environment for shame. It can't survive.
Mhm.
That was so beautiful when I heard that. It was like I got chills that empathy creates a hostile environment for shame. It can't survive, which leads into what Oprah says about when we know better, we do better. And guess what? I started doing better, which in we talked about earlier, do things that invite honor. I was able to then start doing honorable things and pride, that I was able to give up some of these habits that kept me down and in a negative place. And I kept fighting till I found my way out. I never gave up. I just kept thinking, I got to figure this out. And this all led to Jamie and I creating this recovery program that has helped so many progress and move from the dark to the light through these branches of recovery, like Jamie had just mentioned. Do you agree with that, Jamie? What are your thoughts
Yeah.
around
I,
that?
yeah, empathy is huge, and it's a big part of our program, teaching it to each of our members and modeling it for them as well. Often you'll hear leaders responding to our members with things like, I get it, I felt the same way, what you're feeling is normal, it's okay. Obviously having that understanding. Ultimately, we want to make sure that people, our members and potential members feel seen, heard, and understood. And we know that shame thrives in isolation. So it's important to seek connection with others. This might be through a support group such as ours, a therapist, or trusted friends and family. Sharing your struggles with people who understand can help alleviate the burden of shame. You'll likely find that you're not alone in your experiences, and that realization can be very healing. It goes a long way when you feel connected to others. When you don't feel alone, it allows the energy to find the path out. It's way less overwhelming when you have a tribe behind you. I couldn't agree more. That's one of the biggest reasons why we created RFR, and really wanted to make sure that we kept the whole theme around how we can build a community that lifts people up and also incorporates spiritual practices. That was a very important thing for us to do.
Yeah, didn't Shay say this morning that growth is done in community? Is that
Yes.
something
Yeah.
similar to that? But yeah, exactly. I agree with you so much. We know that the fire of shame is fed by silence and secrecy. Left to burn, it can damage all aspects of our lives. So at RFR, we stop throwing fuel on the fire by coming together every day and discussing the happenings of our lives. We have 4 foundational cornerstones in our program that focus on food or food prep, sleep, movement, and spirituality. Like Jamie said, spirituality is not all programs have that, and we do feel like that is a huge component to what we do here. This is just the foundation, and we have other branches that build upon these. So we need a place to start. And when our members feel safe coming in and discussing how they are doing in these areas and get expert feedback specializing in food addiction recovery, change starts to happen in our lives. All of our guidance is laced with love and compassion. People respond to kindness. My mom used to always say, you catch more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And our leaders help our members name their emotions, and then they're able to find their way through them. I saw something really quickly in one of our member chats earlier talking about our foundational principles, and that in recovery, we set up our circumstances to thrive. And that's what I think that we do here at RFR is we have got these foundational principles to set up people's lives to thrive.
Yeah, I agree. So when we think about shame is being obscured by other painful and difficult emotions such as blame and fear, triggers can go unnoticed, causing us to react in inauthentic ways that only serve to exacerbate our shame, which unfortunately further feeds the addiction as it strives to look for ways to numb uncomfortable feelings. That's why we focus so much on talking through what we're really experiencing internally, then finding ways to reframe, followed by looking for action-oriented plans to move from the place where we might be struggling to unearthing a clear path forward. When we exist in deep in the throes of addiction, we have no access to our authentic self, and it is buried in fear. After all, we can't find the right words or don't have the right opportunity and audience. We're left alone with our fears, and we shut down and accept what's given to us. And that's why we make recovery our number one priority, and the world opens up in ways we could never have imagined. And that was certainly my experience for sure.
Yeah, shame is such a significant source of stress that ironically it can exacerbate addiction to processed foods. Or if you don't want to think of it as addiction, you can think about it as the effects of processed food. So if we're under
Mhm.
stress, the effects of processed food can be much more difficult to overcome. When you're stressed, your body releases cortisol, this hormone that can trigger these cravings for high fat, high sugar foods, high salt foods. This creates a loop where shame leads to stress, which leads to more processed food consumption, which leads to more shame. I know it firsthand. It's true. That is very true.
Very true. To further compound this cyclic problem, shame can undermine our self-worth, making it difficult to believe that we deserve a healthier life. when you view yourself as fundamentally flawed, it's easy to fall into the pattern of self-sabotage. And
Mhm.
we ask why we bother trying to recover if we don't believe we're worth the effort. And shame can tell us so many sneaky stories.
Mhm. We would be remiss if we didn't mention that suffering and feelings of shame and personal inadequacies are universal among humans. We all come wired. Have you seen that movie Inside Out, Jamie? Do you know? It's a cartoon. It started like I think in 2015 or 2018. Now there's a Inside Out 2, and it's about this little girl who her parents are moving her across the country, but there's a committee inside her head, and they all play different parts, and they're all trying to speak to one another. And then it also shows where she's speaking like to a boy, and the boy's first thought is girl, terrified that they're, and he's in the fetal position in his brain that there's a girl speaking to him and he's sweating. And so, yes, we all suffer from these. We're humans, universal humans, and we all have these same yeah, fears, inadequacies,
Yes.
self-judgment, but we can benefit ourselves and those around us by recognizing that this is something that we all go through. This is a
Mhm.
shared experience, if you will. So practicing self-kindness over self-judgment is a good place to start. Developing self-kindness includes becoming more understanding and forgiving of ourselves when we perceive our failures. Instead of being hard on ourselves, we can turn to self-compassion, which involves recognizing we are imperfect and that obstacles we face in life, they're inevitable. It's going to happen. You and I were talking about this earlier. This is life, folks. This is what it looks like. You climb one mountain and then you get to the top and you go, oh, there's another one coming at.
Yes. Very true. Very true. We know that finding the right recovery group can be tremendously helpful when dealing with the effects of shame. And here in Real Food Recovery, we're positioned to help those struggling in this area. Anyone who recognizes that shame is negatively impacting their own lives and those of others around them, or those who find themselves stuck and unable to move forward, would greatly benefit from our program, and essentially just allowing us to be that soft place to fall. Shame is a powerful emotion that can hinder your recovery from processed food addiction or abuse or overuse. It doesn't have to define your journey. And recognizing and addressing shame, practicing self-compassion, seeking connection, and implementing practical strategies can break you free from its grip.
That's so true. And remember, you are not alone. You are worthy of a healthier, happier life. Be kind to yourself and take it one step at a time. We hope you have enjoyed this episode geared towards reducing the power of shame in our lives, and that you have discovered the power that empathy and self-compassion can hold in the path to peace. That's, again, ultimate goal. We just can't say that enough. Having a peaceful, calm, quiet brain, ultimate gift in life. If you want to know more
Yes.
about what we do at RFR, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U. So now, before we're not quite done, let's get into some listener questions. Jamie, do you want to take the first one?
Yeah, I have so much shame around my binges. I'm not sure I can ever change that. And I don't think it deserves to be looked at any other way than shameful because it is shameful. So again, the biggest thing there is looking again at the emotions that you have certainly need to be looked at and treated with curiosity and compassion. But the bigger um, thing here is to look at how you're structuring what you're eating, right? Our when we look at anyone who's having consistent binges, the other side of consistent binging is restriction. So what are you restricting and why? And what are you not restricting? Because many times what folks are eating or not eating, right? Like let's say that the example I'm thinking of is protein. So if they're not eating enough protein or enough fiber with their protein, right? So enough lean sources of protein, animal or plant, and enough fiber from vegetables and low sugar fruits. What are they doing to set themselves up so that they're creating this if they're not eating enough of those things, they're setting up an environment to really create this binge and restrict cycle. And they're not even realizing that they're doing it. They're thinking, well, it's all about the fact that I can't have ice cream, so then I binge on ice cream.
Yeah.
They're missing the fact that they're what they're not giving themselves, the most basic building blocks in food, they're not giving themselves. So it's not about the ice cream or the cookies or the junk food or whatever. It's about the fact that they're not feeding themselves what their body needs in the first place.
No, I agree with that so much. I love that point about fiber and water. And of course, fruits and vegetables are the
Mhm.
most dense of that. And that provides satiation, right? Eh,
Right,
We had a
right.
great conversation yesterday with someone who was talking about before a binge, everything is emotional, and after the binge, everything is reacting from the addiction. I thought that was an interesting thought. I'd never heard it that way, too. So yeah, great.
And also chemical, right? She was saying it's emotional before the binge, and after the binge, after the processed food is eaten, that's the chemical response that takes over.
Mhm. Yeah, very well said.
I
Thank
love
you
that.
for.
I agree. It was very helpful to look at it that
Right?
way.
Were you familiar with that?
No, not put that way. I really like how she put it that way.
Yeah. So, a second listener question. Do you have any quick tips for battling shame that are easy and useful? So, some people that we know revert to journaling. That can be a powerful tool to process your emotions, to write about your experience, your feelings of shame, your victories, no matter how small. This practice can be helpful to see your progress over time and reinforce that positive image. And also, I just love self-talk. I really think the most powerful tool we have is the conversation that we have within ourselves, the relationship
Mhm.
we have within ourselves, and asking ourselves, is that really true? Is that 100% true that there's no other way to think about this? How about if we look at it this way? Literally, it's almost like a back and forth conversation in your head. For me, I find that extremely helpful. A couple other quick things are mindfulness or meditation, if that's helpful for you to stay present and reduce that negative chatter, is what we're trying to get rid of. Deep breathing, guided meditations can center you and provide that sense of peace. And the last one I
Mhm.
really like is positive affirmations. That can actually rewire your brain to counteract shame. I always talk about positive
Yes.
affirmations and how that can change you deep down on a cellular level. So create, if that does help, create a list of affirmations that resonate with you, such as I'm worthy of love and respect, or I'm capable of change and growth. And then just repeat those throughout the day or whenever you
Yes.
need them for a more
Agreed.
positive self-image.
Next for your question, I'm so hard on myself. When I make a mistake, it makes me feel small and insignificant, but I don't know how to pull out of that cycle. So again, that comes back to that whole idea of, having compassion for yourself. Having compassion for yourself when you make the choices you make, having, curiosity instead of fear or judgment, and also making sure that you can really connect with a community, whether in a community that is safe and emotionally uplifting, is a really good place to start to pull you out of that cycle.
I love that. You just said that about a community that's safe. So know your sources, right?
Mhm.
Of make
That's right.
sure that that is a vetted community.
That's
Uh,
right. Yeah, very important.
the last one is I keep hearing that you are supposed to talk about shame that you feel in your life, but that is so embarrassing. How can that possibly help when it seems like that would only make somebody feel so much worse? I don't get it. So, first off, know your audience, reach out to someone
That's
you
right.
trust.
Be
So,
very careful who you talk about your shame with. Very careful.
in all capital letters, right? Very careful. So
Mhm.
you can tell them your story because shame cannot survive being spoken. You
Mhm.
are only as sick as your secrets because if kept in silence, it festers and ends up overwhelming your life. Brene Brown says that secrecy, silence, and judgment, those are the three things shame needs to grow exponentially in our lives. So the
Mhm.
antidote is always empathy. Shame cannot survive being spoken and being met with empathy.
Yeah,
Good
very
place to
true.
end on. Anything else you want to add before we finish?
No, important and um, very important podcast. And I did when I was before RFR, I had my own YouTube channel and I did a whole talk on, the shame monster, and
Ooh,
was the title of the video. So I
oh,
encourage you guys to go back and check that out on my YouTube channel. At the time was called Such a Pretty Face. Again, this is before Real Food Recovery. And I go into great detail of my experiences with shame and how I pulled myself out of them and continue to do so. So it's a very important topic, and I'm glad we're talking about it.
did you, in your experience of doing that, did we cover the things that you think are the most important in pulling out of
Yeah,
shame? Okay, well,
definitely.
now I'm gonna have to go back and watch it. I want to see it too. Now you've piqued my curiosity. Thank you, Jamie. Thank you for all you do and for being such a great partner.
Well,
And again,
thank
if you
you.
want to find out more about us, you can find us at realfoodrecovery4u.com. That's the number 4 and the letter U, and we will see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye bye.